This is Dying Light, the Beast. We're here on Xbox Series X. Be sure to like the video, subscribing is great as well. So this is a standalone experience within the Dying Light franchise. It kind of continues from the events of Dying Light 2, and also, strangely enough, Dying Light 1, as we get to see the protagonist return, that being Kyle Crane. That's right, you're playing as Crane, the original protagonist for the Dying Light series. You've come back, you are beastly. Are you the real beast? You'll have to find out. But yeah, no, the character has returned after many, many years, and in the universe, I guess a good decade and a half or so, under some torturous situation. You break out, and then you start unleashing, and you're aiming to get allies as you fight against this barren foe, who's a bit of a sociopathic monster kind of a guy, and yeah, that's kind of the gist of the core story on this one, as far as like narrative. So you go in, you start smashing zombies around, you fight these stronger zombie type foes, and yeah, you kind of build yourself up over the course of the game in regards to just like making yourself tougher. You get skill points, beast points, and you fight zombies, and yeah, no, it's an interesting experience. It's something where you could definitely tell that like a bit of it is quite padded. So this is something like I had played through on the PlayStation 5 Pro, and it was mostly like, okay, cool, I could take a look at it on Xbox, and let's talk about it. And that's kind of the situation we're dealing with here. But yeah, you get this new kind of open world area to explore and play within. You could do so alone. There's 4-player co-op you can jump into and enjoy. If you're not familiar with the series, it's sort of like the remnants of Dead Island, but with parkour. So you're hopping, flowing, and moving through the environment as you attempt to battle the zombies. Now, of course, a big part of this really is kind of justifying it as being, you know, a standalone expansion. That's the big thing, right? Like, this is supposed to be its own game, its own experience. So you don't need to have played Dying Light 1 or Dying Light 2 to experience this game. I think it definitely helps a lot, considering this literally directly continues the events of those games. But yeah, no, it like straight up you could just play this by itself and use it as a good entry point into the series and kind of understand where things are. If you are planning to play the other games, though, I wouldn't recommend playing this one first because of how much it leans on what has happened prior. But this could very well be your initial play, the initial start of your Dying Light experience as you try to fend off the zombies, survive during the day, and then deal with the ever-increasing dangers of the night situation when it comes to the undead, which is quite fun. So yeah, the story itself, I think it was like 10 plus hours pretty easily. I think you'll spend more time doing it because this game has some really kind of aggressive like level gaps, which are kind of weird as you play, and like the XP system in this is really kind of annoying, and I do think it actually needs a bit of refinement because it's got that like Assassin's Creed kind of like, oh, you need armor level or whatever. Well, not, you don't need armor level, but you get like equipment level, and there's like gear level, and then you got a level, but if you die, you lose XP, and you don't really gain XP by doing the story stuff very well, so you're kind of sitting there being under-leveled, and it's kind of a little bit annoying. Honestly, it genuinely is a little annoying, for sure. So let's talk about the technical details now. So there's a streamer mode if you're streaming, and there's a brutality level if you need to make it less brutal. We've been playing on performance mode, but we're going to switch over to quality. There's an FOV option at the bottom. There's film grain, motion blur, all this stuff that you can adjust very easily. But for the quality mode, which I really wouldn't necessarily recommend playing it in this mode, like, I mean, if you want a better visual experience, I guess you can go for this, but with a game that's very action-oriented, very movement flowing, very, you know, kind of combat-esque, I don't think quality mode is where you need to go, but, you know, you do you. So this is a 4K resolution from a temporal 1080p. Well, I guess it temporally scales from 1080p to 4K at 30 FPS. So that's an option. I mean, it looks pretty good. You got moving clouds, which are quite fluffy and beautiful, and you know, you've got a pretty dynamic scenery. But like, yeah, quality mode, I just wouldn't say it really is the one to go for, but you know, you do you. And you know, the choice is completely up to you, of course. And then you've got performance mode. So performance mode is 4K, but it's basically like 1080p from like 600p. So they take like 600p and then they go up to 1080p, and then it just like outputs 4K or whatever. But it's quite blurry. Honestly, especially on Series X here, it is quite blurry. It's no blurry than any of the usual kind of games this gen, as far as using temporal scaling. Like, it's not out of the ordinary, but like, you really, when you're looking out into like the distance and stuff like that, it's like the buildings in the far distance over there, and even in the middle ground, quite blurry. And you know, you get the 60 FPS. I did notice like some droppage a little bit in some areas, but like, it's not really noticeable. It's largely a smooth running experience as you go around the town. Like, the town is the sort of test area of the game, because this is where the density is and this is where the zombies are for the most part. But you know, the quest will have you kind of going around this map back and forth, back and forth. It's really weird too, because like, a lot of it is kind of like missions that are sort of tutorial type missions for quite a while into this, and you'll go across the map and it'll be like, go from this area to this area. And it's sort of like a lot of time padding kind of stuff. And like, it's not bad, but it is sort of like, you look at it and you're like, they're really trying to like justify this being like a standalone. Because it's like, the environment and stuff is kind of fantastic, honestly. Like, this is a really fun parkour place. And for the most part, the parkour works quite fine. There's some spots where it's a little iffy, but when it's flowing and you're kind of like jumping along from spot to spot, it's really quite cool. At the same time, this one, compared to the other Dying Lights, I found I was more often having some issues figuring out where exactly I needed to go. Like, how to enter places or do certain things. I was like, which was a bit odd. So that's something I noticed too from that perspective. And like, it's a good standalone sort of thing. But there are elements of it where I'm sort of like, you know, I definitely feel like some aspects of it like are a little rushed for the narrative. It does sort of tie things together really nicely for future installments that they will very likely be doing, because, you know, it's a big franchise for them, and you know, why wouldn't you? It does seem like, I don't know, some stuff is improved. I liked having the core character come back, and you know, don't worry, they treat Dying Light 2 well. If you were into that one, you know, they do actually care about that one's inclusion in the series. And it's an interesting game. Like, I would say if you're a Dying Light fan, you're probably going to want to grab this, and you'll actually maybe like it even more than you like Dying Light 2. If you're sort of new to the series, or maybe even coming off of Dying Light 1, it's a little bit more difficult, if that makes sense to really get into, just because it is sort of like, it's a standalone spin-off. It works for what it is, but it does lean on other things, and some of the stuff's kind of annoying. Like, the main quest is fine, it's a decent length. There's side activities, there are like dark zones you can go to, there's safe rooms you can get, but that's where a big issue of the game is as far as travel goes. Like, there's no fast traveling. And like, you would be like, oh, I captured a safe point. You think you could fast travel, and it's like, no, you can't. So it is a lot of walking, and then they literally have the trucks ripped right from Dead Island 1 in this. I mean, they look nicer, but they drive like the same, and they look basically the same, just a little bit enhanced. But I thought it was so funny, because I was like, you know, wow, that's the spitting image of those trucks from back in the day. And it's just, Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like gameplay mechanics wise, it's fine. When you get your beast mode going, it's quite entertaining, and then you get all these strengths and stuff that you build up. It was kind of annoying doing like the nighttime would sort of interrupt like questing. Like I'd be doing a quest where it's like, oh, we've got X amount of time, but I'd be getting stalked by these like night creatures, and I'd be like, wow, how am I supposed to do this with the night creatures attacking me while I'm attempting to, do the actual mission? It was a bit awkward. But yeah, no, it's fine. I think if they balance like the leveling a bit, like you can pick a different, like an easier difficulty where you don't lose XP. But mostly the thing is, I felt like I was getting an inadequate amount of XP from like doing the story content, which was disappointing, as I wanted to, kind of just play the story stuff, and it was just kind of like when you die, you lose your stuff as far as like XP. Well, you lose some XP, and it's just like I didn't really feel like I was getting ahead, or at the pace the game kind of expected me to do in order to get story stuff, which means it was very much like kind of a padding thing where it's like, you're supposed to spend more time doing side stuff and just instead of doing the actual story, and it's sort of like, I don't love that idea. And like the gear system and stuff's a bit odd. Like I quite liked a lot of the setup and where you went and some of the interesting characters met along the way and the things you do in this. Some of it's quite interesting. The setting is great, and the villain is kind of cool, and, the zombies and the gore system's fantastic, and where the zombies come from is really cool, and the bosses get a little, like, the concept of it gets a little repetitive, though, because it really is, you do a little bit of story, and then you go fight a chimera, and they're all, like, a little bit different. Some's, like, invis, some spits acid. Yeah, and then the guns are kind of neat too. Like the guns like kill humans really quickly, but they don't do anything against zombies. And then like blades don't really do things against humans, but the guns do. And it's got a neat balancing. And it's like it's a very detailed world. Like there's a lot going on, a lot of depth, and there's some slightly different areas. But it is kind of annoying because they do just kind of send you from like one spot to another spot to another spot, and you reuse some of the areas and like. It's clever. Like I like these standalone games because they allow us to explore, things a little bit more, if that makes sense. Like explore characters and narratives in depth a little bit more. But when you're playing something like this and you're sort of like, yes, the gameplay time is there, but it's sort of like they're padding it. I prefer something that's a little bit more tighter and kind of respects my time a bit more. And I feel like that to me is more rewarding than something that's like a little bloated where I'm kind of sitting there being like, well, I know what you're doing here. And, but I know like a lot of people really do need to feel like they get that value out of it. But for me, I can really tell when it's sort of awkwardly attempting to artificially extend my experience with the game. And it really kind of like, I feel that when I was playing this. But I also feel like they've crafted something cool, and I wouldn't mind seeing additional smaller games like this within the Dying Light kind of universe, because I feel like the potential to do kind of cool little stuff with it is quite neat. So it's an interesting little experimental thing, and I'd love a lot of other games if they did little spin-offs like this, some asset reusal and, different places just to kind of build out their worlds. Like, I feel like there's a lot that could be done with games doing that, especially with how long it takes to make games, but yeah, so they balance some stuff pretty well here. They provide a pretty cool environment with a lot of zombies and a lot of threats that you have to deal with and, troubles you have to solve, and you don't really get choice, but there's like narrative you kind of work through, and there's some interesting character moments and betrayals and twists and turns and false betrayals and all kinds of crazy stuff that goes on in the story. Like, the narrative's actually quite interesting. But like I said, it does kind of skip around a little bit, which is a little weird. Like, you'll kind of be like, how do we get to this point really quickly? And that was a little disjointed, but it felt like they kind of wanted it to be longer from a story perspective, but they just weren't able to gameplay-wise or something. I don't know. Mostly, like, it's a fine Dying Light game, and it looks okay on Series X. Like I said, though, like, the performance mode is definitely blurry. I don't know how good it looks to you from a viewing perspective, but like for me playing the game, it does definitely have a blur through its environment, which is quite noticeable. But like it is fine. It's quite detailed. The amount of depth within each of the areas, the depth of like the different things going on. Like there's all these little stones and grass and little like set places and zombies and things going on and things for you to dip across and climb on or smash or go through and visit and see. It's quite interesting. Like I definitely do see how you would have some fun with this, and those that do like the usual parkour stuff are going to be quite pleased with this. And then of course there is a crafting system where you gather items and you can make some stuff a little tougher, and you gotta manage your resources and explore and do things. And like there's quite a lot to like about this, but there's also a lot where I sit there and I'm just kind of like, I was hoping for a little bit more. At the same time, I was like, it's about what I expected. Got some cool like boss type things going on, and yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of nice to have the main character return. I think it definitely helps with a lot of the issues people had, I guess you would say, with the second game. But it still has some of the remnants of the second game in it, and you're sort of just like, But I think it's a good course correction for the series that most people will probably be quite happy with, I would imagine. So I'm really curious to see what the reception is going to be on all this stuff as everything kind of lands. But I will say from my perspective, like I got a decent amount of time at it, and by the time I was finished it, I was kind of like, I enjoyed that, but at the same time I had, as I noted, kind of the problems with like some pacing stuff, some difficulty stuff in some areas, and then like, yeah, some of the boss fights just kind of felt grindy, where I was like, okay, I need to just difficulty here, because I'm like, just what is the point of grinding this boss out? And that's like, especially with the sort of item debt you get, because like if you die, you sort of have all the items and stuff, but it's also the usage of those items still kind of like persists across your death. So you kind of get like whittled down for like resources, which can be annoying. So yeah, that was kind of fascinating. I don't know, it's got like a nice vibe to it. This is what I was talking about, like a spitting image of a Dead Island 1 truck, which is hilarious. Yeah, I don't need a tutorial on vehicles, thank you. But the new tech for like the zombies on top of the hood though is fantastic. Like it's really, the physics stuff on that is super cool. As that happens, and it's like I like the setup of this too. Like as far as you start the game, you're breaking out, you're getting back into the world, trying to get accustomed to everything that's going on and how things have changed, and then you're trying to survive, and like they use this map really well. So you get around, you get to see all the little bits of it, you get to see different factions, you get to see how everybody's dealing with the current situation. I don't know how the window wiper fluid still exists after like a couple of decades or so of the whole world falling apart and all that, but I don't know. There's a lot to get into and enjoy within the beast, and you feel like a character that becomes slightly more powerful as you sort of like level up and get your skill points and your beast points. And yeah, it's an interesting venture, honestly. Like it definitely does try to do something safe while also doing something a little bit different, and then trying to just create a bit of a cohesive setup here as they move forward with Dying Light into the future. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do next with it, honestly. Like this is pretty essential from an overall story perspective. I just really think there's something good here if they would just tighten up some of the gameplay mechanics, or at least make some of the game a little less grindy, like feel like you're like leveling a bit, or at least allowing some sense of fast travel, because like a good chunk of it just felt like I was very slowly kind of walking from one side of the map to the other, and that just isn't rewarding to do, especially when it's like, oh, some of it's parkour, but some of it is literally just a wasteland that you're like empty fields that you're walking through, and you're kind of like, But anyways, Dying Light the Beast, neat standalone expansion. I'd like to see more sort of options like it, I guess.